what it takes to go and formulate a business like this and go get investors like the co-founders of Slack.
The ultimate problem is, how do you start from zero?
We could reinvent how people experience software.
It's more about the journey and just building something that's truly has a legacy and has a lifetime.
Way of saying it, but focusing on the exit is always a bad idea.
What are some of those non-negotiable traits that you see in successful individuals?
So you have to focus the time, focus the energy, and focus all of your knowledge that you're building to really understand what value are you providing to these people.
Then they have the ability to distill that information, make a decision, have conviction, and then execute maniacally.
If you could go back to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself? Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Wealth. I'm your host, Andres Sanchez, and today I have Chris Port and Steve Wood, the founders of Noted AI. As you all know, I've been very focused on bringing on founders, building in the AI space, because I think business owners really need to start to lean in and not shy away from leveraging AI. So I wanted to come on and have Chris and Steve talk about their brand, talk about their business, and share the product that they are building with all of you. Thank you guys so much for being on here.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I want to start off and let the listeners and viewers right now learn about you all. Who is Steve and who is Chris?
Well, shall I start then? So I'm a multi-time founder, entrepreneur. I built my first company and sold it to Salesforce.com. It's now has its own mascot, which is a flying squirrel called Flo, which is kind of cool. And then I left that, did another startup, and then I sold that to Dell and Boomi, which is where I met Chris here. And then we both locked arms at Boomi for a while as on the executive team. I then got tired of working with Chris, so I decided to quit. And then go over to Slack. And I worked at Slack for a few years. I rebuilt the Slack platform and then left to start Noted. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing.
Yeah. So Chris Port, as Steve mentioned, I was the chief operating officer of Boomi, was part of the journey from, call it sub 1 million to over 400 million of ARR and sub 100 million to acquisition price to 4 billion acquisition price when it was sold to private equity firms. And that's where I did meet Steve. And we were able to sell after he left. I always make that point clear. But and before that was a GM in Dell's software organization and a myriad of roles at this now for just over a year.
Amazing. And definitely very, very junior from both of your angles. You haven't done that much in your career. Very impressive backgrounds. And I think it's really interesting because I haven't had that many founders that have come on the show that are at your level or have had those experiences at these $100 million+ businesses. I've got a lot of younger people hungry, trying to build, but I think it's very valuable for the audience to hear what it's like on the journey that you all have. So I'm curious, and both of you can answer this and we can kind of round robin, but what led you early on to jump into entrepreneurship?
Well, for me, it was just a burning idea. I kind of wanted to automate knowledge, which became a workflow product, but it started out as knowledge automation. And it was just a burning idea. I had to do it. And I just started working on it at nights. I'm a programmer, so I built it and then started building, got more progressively excited about it. And then I quit my job and went full time. And that was the kind of just burning desire. And then I think when I got into Salesforce, it was just, again, I just had this burning feeling that we could do better with workflow and application development. So built a platform around that. So yeah, it's always just been this kind of just, I guess, a slightly nerdy requirement to solve these problems. I also just really like the idea of empowering people with technology. So all my stuff has always been about bringing technology more to more of a mass market appeal than keeping it in the confines of the super professionals and the elite type. We're actually sort of bringing it out and saying, hey, anybody can do this. Now you can build a mobile app too, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was that was the main impetus for me. It was never money. That never motivated me. In fact, if it did, it would have been really hard. Because actually, my first two startups, I bootstrapped them. So
amazing.
I paid their way.
I think, Chris, what got you in?
Well, I think for me, look, I think it's kind of been underneath, it's been kind of simmering for a long time. And I think, I had the opportunity to be on the other side of the table in M&A and, met people like Steve and the founder of Boomi and a bunch of other founders, and always just had this perspective. And then, Steve and I met, whatever it was now, moving in on 2 years ago. And he kind of flashed me an idea and I was like, And, I think it was a couple things. It was the idea was profound and big enough to A, it was like solving a real-time problem I had, but then B, I was like, wow, it kind of like lit the fire that maybe was like simmering. And then two, I just think the thought of, my perspective is that there will always be other COO or maybe even CEO gigs in like private equity or software companies that have found scale and product market fit. And I could probably go back to that if I ever really wanted to. But like, I love solving problems, and one could argue that the ultimate problem is how do you start from zero? And the chance to do it with Steve and someone with his background, and candidly, obviously, we're friends, and really, I think, enjoy working with each other and challenging each other. And I looked at this as something that was kind of once in a lifetime. So I don't ever think I'll look back and regret doing this. And I do think if you're a problem solver, like literally solving from zero may be the ultimate problem to solve.
That's amazing. And hearing the 0 to 1, I think about that book that Peter Thiel wrote, 0 to 1, which is one of my favorite books. And before we go in and talk deeply about tactical things, and I do my best to kind of extract the knowledge you all have and give it to the people listening and watching right now, I want to talk about Noted AI and what it is. I want people to be able to understand what you're building, and see if maybe some of the viewers or listeners are a good fit or are interested in pursuing it.
Cool. Do you want me to? I'll take it. We're really relatively new to the pitching of it, so we'll that's sort of investors and things. But yeah, the basic idea actually came from my work at Slack, and the ultimate problem is it felt like I had a lot of information coming at me, and I had nowhere to put it. Like, it was just kind of like, so I went to use notes and things like that, and I found that was all fine, but then you had to organize all this information yourself, and you'd often go through a day of meetings, be like, oh man, now I have to go back and collate all my notes. I got to stick some stuff in Jira, update that presentation over there. And it really struck me. I was like, hold on, so the human way to work is messy, flawed, all that kind of stuff. I just dump information into notes. And then the next stage is I have to then put it into these systems that are very system out. Nobody ever said, oh yeah, I'm Salesforce transformed my sales experience. I literally became a top-notch sales dude or person because of my ability to sell using Salesforce. Salesforce is needed so your manager knows what you're doing, and the same way that Jira is for engineering leaders. It makes your manager more productive. It doesn't need to help you in your job. I just felt like there's got to be a better way of kind of connecting how humans work with the things that the systems need. And so we thought, well, what if we could build a note-style interface that helped you get work done, connected to the systems that you routinely use every day. So use AI more as the workhorse rather than this kind of creative force in your life, and kind of get rid of all that admin. So you can continue to be your messy, flawed human and just kind of work the way you do. And let's let the machines do what they need to do to drive the workflows, drive the reports and the dashboards. But let's focus on the human. And it felt like we've hit this nexus of forces around automation, AI, and integration with tools that we can kind of pull this off. So we both come from that background. So it was like, hold on a second. There's a moment happening right now where we could reinvent how people experience software. And so that was the goal. And that's what we've been out doing. So that'd be my pitch. Yeah. Anything to add to that, board?
Yeah, I think that's a great synopsis of what we're out setting to do. When I looked at it, I was immediately drawn to it because I was like, well, wait a minute. As we think about what we're going to set forth to build, it's to at least on one level, to start, this kind of gives every knowledge worker this luxury of having effectively a digital EA, that I had the luxury of having, Steve's had the luxury of having, human EAs, in past lives when I had a massive 500+ person team, globally, and I'm going from a customer meeting that could be an escalation to a sales pitch with a customer to a product strategy meeting to a customer support organizational and how we're going to set it up. And, everybody's like, wow, how are you so organized and ready for each meeting that are so context switching? It's because I literally have a second me that's a human preparing me for all of this. And if you first layer, we can literally do that digitally now, as we start to think about the convergence of as Steve puts it, automation, AI, and connectivity. And then as we started to really pull the thread, it's well, wait a minute, I know 20 years ago when I was doing an inside sales type job, I remember getting on my first like Friday afternoon pipeline call and just having a VP just crush sales makers for not having their stuff in Salesforce, like literally crushing them. And fast forward to my days, at Boomi, and I'm on the other side of that coin, and I'm the person now crushing people as I'm about to fly over the weekend for a customer meeting, in Europe on a Monday morning, and I'm like, I literally know you've spoken to them 38 times in the last month, and there's literally not one thing in Salesforce for me to glean. What are you doing? And name your tool. It could be Salesforce, it could be Gainsight, it could be Jira. It's like, where is all this incredible information? And it's like, well, maybe we're into this journey, and maybe we need to rethink. Like, we're 20 years in and we're still beating people up to please get your information and to name your system of record. Maybe we need to start thinking more like humans and knowledge workers think, and meet them where they work, which is really at the root set of the data, which is our notes and our conversations. In like, if we can just use that and then obfuscate those applications that, I hate to say it, nobody that actually does work really likes, then like we've just got a massive opportunity. And I think now with the convergence of these forces, like the time is here.
Actually, well, I know your viewers are younger, so I have 3 daughters who are, one who's in college at the moment, so that'll be wild for some of your listeners. But but I do think like we see a world where like 3 or 4 years from now, when my daughters are entering the workplace, that they're going to go, oh my God, like that was crazy, Dad. Like you actually had to enter data into these fields and these databases and hit save and manage all these lists of data and sort them to try to figure out what was going on. Like that was crazy. Like, how did you guys even work like that? Like, that's just insane. Like, it'll be like saying, oh, I used to program in binary. It's like, wow, like that's awesome for you. That must have been fun. So that's kind of, a new world. And I think we're there.
Yeah, and it's funny for me, this hits home so hard. I don't share on camera, and I'll share it with you guys off camera, but I work, I'm 25, about to be 26. I work at one of the top 10 tech companies in the world. I am the guy that's getting yelled at for not updating my Salesforce regularly. Like that is me during 9 to 5 every day. And hearing you all talk through this, like I know most reps aren't doing it or aren't not entering the data on purpose. It is very like when you're in the flow, when you're in the zone, especially in the lower markets like commercial or SMB, you've got thousands of accounts. It is hard to do the little details, but I could see if I just had one area where I could dump daily, just dump things, add it, and then it was able to go in and populate all these tools that, like you said, don't particularly make me more efficient, but they make my manager more efficient, which is extremely important. I can see a ton of value in something like that.
Yeah. And I think that for us, the really interesting realization is that, like, look, I come from a workflow background. I built multiple workflow platforms. We come from an automation background, but like, it's really interesting that like we always try to model our businesses in the form of a relational database in terms of how we organize information. And we try to organize how we execute processes in the form of these structured, rigid flow diagrams. Like we've kind of decided in enterprise software that we work to these rigid relational structures and these rigid workflow structures. But we all actually know that's not actually how work actually happens. How it actually works is messy. It's a graph. The relationships are complex. There are many to many associations with all the things. So what we've been building underpinning this technology is a really rich knowledge graph. So we can understand what you care about, what the business objects are around you. We understand the systems that are tied to those business objects. So we can start to get a feel for like, okay, like these are the things that kind of power how you make decisions. We kind of understand the context of your day, and we can really start building a system around you so that you're kind of getting the data you need when you need it. So like an example we've used, so actually the persona we're after is customer success, because we feel like, or account management type people, because we feel like they're not all that well served. But like, think about this scenario, you go into a customer and you make a promise like, yes, we'll add that new feature to our product in order for your renewal that's coming up to make sure you can add those additional 50 seats. But then the success person goes speak to the engineering manager, like, yeah, we'll get that done, don't you worry. And then there's other opportunities and tickets and things flying all over the place. The engineering manager, let's call her Jane for lack of imagination, like Jane thinks, oh, we're not burning through the issues fast enough. We'll just kick that Jira issue back a quarter, not realizing that there's like 5 opportunities worth 30 million in ACV and like renewals all tied to that. Well, we can build that graph, and we actually can understand that graph from ingesting your knowledge graph from your calendar, from your notes, from your conversations. We can then go, oh, hey, Andres, like those opportunities are really at risk because Jane just moved that Jira issue back. Like that's a piece of information that we can bring to you. So rather than you having to look at a dashboard and try to figure out is anything going wrong, we can let you know when the company is effectively going out of alignment. And that's the kind of the stuff that we're working on. So it becomes a very powerful tool, not just for populating the data, but also monitoring the stuff you care about. So we can let you know if something's going awry. So yeah, that's what we've been busy building.
Yeah, my fiance is a CSM, a customer success manager in big tech. I feel like I wish I could bring her in the room right now and say, hey, this is hopefully what your company will be implementing over the next 365 days so that your life is easier, because she complains about everything that you're talking through right now, which are pain points for these roles at these big companies. It's funny, like I didn't know this was going to be such an at home conversation. Like these are my day to day and her day to day problems. I'm curious. So you all now are obviously in the early stages of rolling this out. Is the ideal market going to like a Fortune 100 tech company and trying to sell into that market? Is this a solution that smaller SMB and solopreneurs and different things like that can go and leverage? I just want to kind of understand the market.
Yeah, well, I think like Steve kind of articulated, I think right now our ICP is we're targeting success teams, account management, really kind of like go to customer facing teams as well as startups. Like we have a design partner that is a startup, 5 people, and and they're leveraging Noted for all of their customer facing discussions. One of the use cases there is that like right when a new person starts, they can kind of share basically the tag of a customer, like name your customer Acme, and that person now can get up to speed. They get kind of that executive briefing that's live in the product today to kind of really get them acclimated. They see any kind of tasks, like here's what Acme is expecting us to do, who's to do that. If they did have any trouble tickets or anything like that, they could quickly get that, perspective and lineage. So very kind of like easy to get up to speed and keep that. But then the other, but that's also why success, within and success I would define as it could be a smaller company. So we think startups are a good kind of hunting ground to really start to test this out, but also, success because they're at the nexus and they have to deal with so many systems. We absolutely, we have some early introductions to some companies that I would put in that kind of big company realm to kind of work with teams to start, but that have myriads of systems that we could plug into to kind of obfuscate those systems to the background to really unleash a success person to go make customers successful and not worry about finding, I literally talked to a success manager today at a $500 million company. And he was like, I got assigned a new trouble account. And he's like, it's going to take me the entire day to just get a baseline of everything going on with this customer. And because they have disparate tools, a success tool that is kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the space, but he's like, it's very, very difficult for me to actually get up to speed using that tool. And in fact, I don't really like having to interact with that tool. That's really for my manager. So it's like, yep, that sounds familiar. So those kind of are our target hunting grounds to start, that we think we can really help, accelerate productivity and make them incredibly successful.
Yeah, I mean, part of our thing is like we think we can like push out some of the bigger decisions. Like, oh, we should probably buy Salesforce now that we have like 3-4 sales reps, or we should go buy Gainsight because we now have like 3 or 4, success managers. We feel like we're tired of the enterprise software industry, of which we've unfortunately had a hand in building. But like we're tired of the sort of brand promise of like just grease our hand with $25,000 or $1,000 and then $5,000 setup fees, and we got to get it connect to all our tools, and then magically your business will be transformed into something much better. We just think that that's a kind of just a bad way to do business. We would rather like prove value to you like incrementally over time. So we think we can do that. You'll know in a lot of ways. You'll see also we've got a lot of inspiration from Slack. Actually, in fact, the 2 co-founders of Slack are in fact investors in our business.
Very cool.
But like, so it's kind of our goal is to just make people more productive and kind of like help them with the data, help them just manage the wealth of knowledge that they're accumulating as they grow up, whether that be a team or whether that be an actual company itself.
Amazing. I want to go into a little bit of a different area of the conversation. I know a lot of our viewers here are on the younger side, probably in that 24 to 35 range, some 18 to 24. almost everybody's goal is to build a big business that either gets acquired or it goes public. Like, I know almost every entrepreneur is interested in that. You all have done that and sat in that space. Talk a little bit about, without getting maybe too technical, what it takes to go and formulate a business like this and go get investors like the co-founders of Slack to come on and be part of that journey. I think people would get a lot of value from that.
I could talk from my perspective on that. I suppose well, I mean, obviously we look a little different, I suppose, than like a 24-year-old walking into an investor's office, because we can actually point it. Like, in my case, can point prior businesses can port here. But no, I think that there is a lot of I do think there's a lot of misnomer around this idea of, the perfect pitch deck to the investor and all this kind of stuff. I know that there are investors like that. I'd say they're the less advanced ones that are kind of would be worrying about your pitch deck. The reality is, we know that everything that's in your pitch deck is going to be wrong, because if it was right, you're literally the most genius of genius people that ever walk the planet Earth, and so it's not correct. Whatever you're pitching is not correct. It's an idea space that you're working in, which you think is exciting and could be exciting, and it should be a good idea. But you have to really prove to the investors that you're the team that can actually work in that space and find the product market fit, because it takes a long time to find the right equation. So how you craft that, you have to feel the team is engaged and willing to do that. So I don't think I don't know. In terms of getting your investors, I think you definitely need to convince them that you have the team to do it, and you have an idea that's good enough working in a problem space that feels like it's got the growth to do it. Yeah, I don't know, but from an actual building a company to actually selling it, I think I wouldn't focus on the exit. I know that's a trite way of saying it, but focusing on the exit is always a bad idea. Focus on you need to focus on finding product market fit, and I often see it's something you have to really, really nurture, and it's a really amazing experience when it happens, because you're so sitting there, well, press that, do this, that doesn't work. Well, how about this? And you keep trying and trying, and all of a sudden you go, do that, then do that, and then money just plops out, and users start using. Oh, that's interesting. If I do that again, well, that worked. Well, that's good. We should just keep doing that. And so I think staying focused, listening a hell of a lot, working with early customers, really understanding that you're in a problem space, you're not in a specific idea. Be willing to sort of pivot and move. That's the kind of. So I don't know if that's just everybody's advice, but that would be mine.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the way I look at it, on the fundraising side, I mean, to me, I don't think we didn't know, and is successful as Steve's been, he'd never properly raised money. So we kind of went into this, without knowing what we didn't know. But what I think a couple of things, I think we focused on a very discrete number of what I'll call not advisors formally, but just some people that we knew through our own networks. And we just asked super candid questions. And we were very transparent about what we didn't know. We didn't go in there trying to pretend and scared to ask what could have been really dumb questions. And maybe they thought they were, I don't know. But we just had very candid, frank discussions with a handful of people that had gone on this journey. So first off is find some people that have been on that journey, but a discrete number. Don't go find 80 and try to distill 80 points of view down to it. Or there's, I think all of us get every day the 5 ways to be the most successful pitch person ever. It's none of that exists. It's you've got to be who you are. And then, I think our passion for the idea, I would hope to think that it came through fairly loud and clear to everybody we pitched. And then, as we think about the company, I think both Steve and I have always gone into this, it honestly isn't about the money. I think if you go into it thinking about an exit, I don't know, but that feels like a really hard way, because it's so every day is, it's a food fight every day in this business. And I know I'm learning my way through that the first time. And, Steve's on his 4th part of this journey, but every day is such a food fight that you have to have conviction over the long term. And I mean, I think Steve and I would love a vision. We have the co-founders of Okta in our business, and, they're still, one of them still running it and the other still involved. And I'd love to see I think we both love solving problems and working together. And if that's ultimately what this becomes, is a big company that we're super engaged with and we're engaged intellectually, to me, that's an awesome outcome. So I don't look at it as the outcome is some exit in terms of IPO or selling or any of that. It's more about the journey and just building something that's truly, has a legacy and has a lifetime.
Yeah. And thank you for being candid about explaining, like, and I do wish I could go back and rephrase the question on not saying like the exit is the end point. I just feel like for younger founders, we see, I mean, over the last 5 years, at least from my perspective, we see these exits and it's hard to wrap your head around how much
Yeah.
money is actually involved in this. And that creates kind of that thought of like, oh wow, I'd love that to be me. But I think one thing that I have harped on for a very long time is that, unfortunately, I think social media has gotten people to kind of forget how hard it is to actually build a really good business that is really successful. Like you look on social media and you think almost anybody can go and start something and be a millionaire overnight. And I want to take advantage of this conversation where I'm sitting down with two people who have lived and breathed that and been in the mix.
Totally.
And try and take out whatever I can from that might help people be successful. And everything so far is very spot on.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is this is like, I mean, Silicon Valley has done a huge, in some ways, disservice to entrepreneurs by telling the story of, they only tell the story of the startup at the hockey stick moment when it's like going straight up, and they forget to mention the 8 years of like soul crushing work that they had to go through and rejection in order to get to that point. They magically found the business at the point that the business is skyrocketing. There are no businesses that skyrocket right at the beginning, or if they are, they're like they're the rarest of rare things. And actually I would even question whether there is literally an instance of that. But like there are, but very, very rare. For most entrepreneurs, it's a really hard slog. The first few years at least are just working your butt off, trying to figure out why this thing isn't working, why nobody wants to use it, why your users don't like it, which is why you just have to lean so heavily into that sort of like the customer part of it, and like just listening to your users and trying to find like where is the value really coming from that you can drive for, that you can kind of reproduce every time. You know, like where do you find it? Where's the market? I think people often like make these big mistakes of like, well, I want to be this big thing at the end of the day, but you have to get there. You have to kind of grow up. Like, so I'll give you an example. In my first startup, we were a workflow knowledge automation tool. Like everybody can use it. Every market, it's, my God, anybody can do it. The trouble is you can't reach all those markets, and you can't afford to tell a story that's that big. The only people that can afford that are Google, Salesforce, Microsoft, that can afford the hundreds of millions of dollars it will take to project a story that huge. So you have to kind of just stay maniacally focused, and it can be pretty disheartening for entrepreneurs to do that. Like, so when we started, we're on call after call, and it was just like, with customers trying to figure it out, and like everybody had unique things, unique value propositions. There was nothing reproducible. And then we started noticing, like when we speak to like customer support call centers for inbound call handling and for some outbound sales call handling, they actually find this workflow automation really useful because they have thousands of people. In fact, one of our customers said 60,000 people in a single call center building, which is crazy. I was like, who has 60,000 people to try to call them? But people do. But like, we found that actually call scripting was a use case that worked. And was I passionate about call scripting? Not at all. There was no part of me that loved that. There was no part of me that even wanted to do that. But that was the market where literally we could reproduce value. And so we started hitting that. And then as we grew, we then started to expand out our view of like, could we start to hit more use cases more broadly in different markets? So we literally hit like call center call handling for companies that sold devices or hardware, because those are the ones that always had the right value. And like, it's hard for entrepreneurs to hear that because they want to go like, I'm going to change the world forever. I mean, we just told you that already. Like we love saying it too, but like, you have to pare it down, and it's going to be a strain. And then once you find it, then you can build it, you grow it, and you kind of like keep adding and adding and adding. But
and then I would like and then once you do find it, and kind of that flywheel starts to happen, and I had the luxury of like being right on the latter part of product market fit at Boomi, but then like riding the wave. But then like it's incredibly hard to find it. But then once you find it, it's all of the challenges of scale that start to set in, that like when you look at it like 5 years after the fact, it's kind of this like whimsical, almost romantic like story you tell. But then like literally the days are, I know when we were doing this and we were 50, 75, 100% growth in a quarter, at Boomi, it was just this like every day you felt like, I don't know if I've got enough fingers and toes to like plug all the holes in the boat, as we were just scaling and trying to grow this thing so fast. And, you're starting to broaden into new, like either verticals or new geos. And it just becomes, so it's, all of it is like, it's just, you're trading one problem for another, on this path. And then obviously, even when you get to scale, there's, and then every day, like, oh, wait a minute, there's a new competitor, and oh my gosh, they're going to like, put us out of business because they have this radically new, magical new mousetrap that's maybe, and so it's just, it's all, but I think you have to like enjoy, all of that to really have like true, startup success, and then getting through it to the end. And there is no end, but being part of that journey, you have to just enjoy all the different problem sets that present themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And even at a like small scale, like in smaller businesses I built, and even this company I'm building now, it's a shit show like every day. Like there's just always crazy stuff going on. And you've got to be able to just keep your head going, keep your head down, navigate and continue to move, bob and weave. And I just think that's business. And for people listening now, if you're hearing that and getting excited or thinking in your head, wow, like that's something I'm interested in, that's your calling to go and try and solve problems, try and build things that you think are interesting. And I want to take that to this next question on, you all have had a lot of experience building businesses, but you've also had a lot of experience working with and being around very successful people. What are some of those non-negotiable traits that you see in successful individuals? Because I think people listening here are probably thinking to themselves, do I have what it takes? Am I fit for this? What are some of the things you all saw in your journey?
Yeah, well, I guess we both know some pretty famous people, from Michael Dell to good old Mark Benioff and Stuart Butterfield of Slack and all that kind of Cal Henderson, who I really like. Well, one thing is I don't believe the myth of like the entrepreneur is the person who lights up the room when they walk in and everybody wants to talk to. That's just total BS. I think from a personality trait, like entrepreneurs come in all shapes and sizes. But I would say is that one thing that does seem to be pretty clear is I hate to say being pretty brave, in the sense of being able to go out alone, because entrepreneurship is isolating. It's a team sport, but it kind of doesn't feel like it a lot of the time. It feels like very isolating. So we're usually pretty brave. But I think the one attribute, which I know people say a million times, but I don't think you can say enough, is just focus. Like, it is amazing the people that I've seen who are most successful, just how much they're willing to take big bets on very focused ideas. And they're just going to do it. And you're like, well, why wouldn't you do all the things? Like, no, I'm going to do this thing. Like, I witnessed, Mark Benioff put Chatter into Salesforce. Now, Chatter is not a great product by today's standards at all. But if you think about that, like that Salesforce was a database company where you put data into forms and fields, and it put the Chatter feed above the record. And he said, no, the future of Salesforce is social. It's collaboration. He literally pushed all the value of the product below the feed of Chatter, which was a bold move to do. Nobody had done that in enterprise software before. He also followed the focus of like people wanted to install Salesforce. Loads of customers said, no, but I want to install it. I said, no, our focus is going to be that we're cloud only. And if you want to install it, then you're just simply not going to be a customer. And so many entrepreneurs fail because they're chasing each opportunity as it comes, thinking that they're going to run out of opportunities. The one thing you're not going to run out of is opportunity. Like, that is the one thing you're never going to run out of. What you're going to run out of is steam. And what you're going to run out of is time. So you have to focus the time, focus the energy, and focus all of your knowledge that you're building to really understand what value are you providing to these people, and can you reproduce it quickly? And so like you see that in entrepreneurs. Like, I remember speaking to Stuart Butterfield about this in Slack, and we said, look, Discord, like they're stealing the whole community business. He said, look, it's hard enough to build a collaboration tool for work, let alone building a collaboration tool for communities. I'm just not going to do it. And it was just like, we could have done it. But even then, he just felt like, let's just focus on building a great collaboration tool for work. And so just that focus, determination, bravery, those are the attributes. I know that you've probably heard that 100 times, but that's just the reality. That's the truth.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. To me, the other constant would be is that the successful ones I've met are like insatiable learners. They are voracious consumers of information, but then they have the ability to distill that information, make a decision, have conviction, and then execute maniacally. Which is I think it may be a slightly different way of saying what Steve just said. It's like because I think there's no lack of great ideas. But so much of what makes you know success is like so much about execution. We used to talk about like an M&A, like when buying a company is easy, like actually integrating and making successful is incredibly difficult. And I think that there's some parallels with entrepreneurship. I'm not saying the idea is easy, but there's plenty of great ideas out there. But it's like, not that Steve needs more credit, but I would, he's the rare, like he has ideas, but then like, he'll build over the weekend. And I do think you have to have like the successful ones they have like an insatiable appetite to solve the problem in front of them. And if that means talking for 3 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday, that's what you do. And not because you're dying to do that, it's because you can't sleep without talking it through. And it's just like you wake up thinking about it, you go to sleep thinking about it. It's like it kind of becomes all consuming, but not in a bad way, like in a way that you're like, I don't know what I'd do without this like thing in my head. So, to me, that seems to be a constant. It's just they're constantly thinking about the problem statement in front of them and just executing and going and solving it.
Yeah, I like to think about it like controlled delusion. Like you need to be so optimistic about what you're building that some people or most people would probably think you're borderline delusional until it obviously works and you are successful. I want to come back to Noted here as we kind of get towards the end of our conversation and just allow you all to talk about what's next. Obviously, this is something that you're continuously building. What is kind of on the roadmap? What is something people that are listening can get excited about?
Do you want to take a run? Well, so from a product perspective, we're finding our design partners so we can learn more about how it really works. We use it internally, so we're running Noted on Noted, so we're getting a real feel for how it works, particularly for startups. We're going to take it out to market properly in the beginning of December, all going well, and so really start to ramp up usage as we see it. So like that's kind of like that's kind of the milestone that we're at the moment. We've been building it for about a year to give people a sense of like how long we've been at it. We're not over perfecting it. It has some joke, if you like, and so this probably won't get people excited about using it, but like kind of we're building enough of it so that we can ensure that people will be successful. But if you get deep into it, you'll probably fall off the edge of a cliff somewhere in the tool where we haven't quite finished something. So we're trying not to overbuild because you can always assume that it's hard to assume exactly how people will interpret what you built. But no, from a startup perspective, I just think like our goal is to kind of say, hey, like why not give it a whirl? Like everybody takes notes, like everybody writes stuff down that they care about. Why not write it down in Noted and make it easier to share? See it as a nice complement to Slack. It's kind of Slacky in how we built it. It wouldn't surprise you that two of the people in the company were at Slack. So I think it's kind of exciting there. I think it could, be a better decision than paying for like one of these enterprise tools if you're thinking about that, just to try it and like see if it provides the value that we think it does. And if it doesn't, definitely tell us. But I don't know, that would be my kind of like, that's not a great pitch, but there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say like for anybody listening, it's at Noted, NODED.so is the website. There's a great like quick 2-minute overview gives you very much the spirit of what we're doing. We've kind of talked about like who we're targeting to start, but we are running the company on it. So, Steve's right, but we're also at this incredibly exciting point that either when I or Steve or a design partner or a user kind of comes in with an idea, like we're at that cool moment in time, like depending upon how big the idea is, that, a day, 2 days, 3 days later, we can deliver said idea. And that's where we're at. We're starting to kind of really get like, okay, what do people want to see? We've got a baseline. Like I said, those success tools that are out there, they're incredibly heavy. They're incredibly expensive. A lot of success teams aren't empowered to actually buy any of them. And candidly, we're like, well, you really shouldn't have to, because you should really focus on making customers successful and you shouldn't have to have like an admin to manage a tool for success, which candidly is a little bit of a brokerage app anyways, like when you think about like the tools out there. So, we really think, and we can do this, with at a fraction of the cost, candidly. So we're really excited about like getting towards, this milestone, at the very beginning of December, and really kind of like starting to see rapid adoption, hopefully.
That's amazing. And now I'm excited, obviously, now that I know you both, to follow and watch the journey. And like they mentioned, the link for the website is going to be linked in the bio below for wherever you're
Awesome.
watching or listening right now. So you're able to go in and click it. Go check out the tool. Maybe it's something that works for you. Maybe you just want to learn about what's going on in the world of AI. But I want to wrap up our conversation with a question that I ask all of my guests at the end. It's cool because I get two answers now in one, which is exciting. And it's a typical question. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, I'll take that one first. I mean, I would say take more risk. I mean, I would definitely, take more risk. Like, I don't think I've ever talked to Steve about this, but I did have an idea in 1999, and it kind of gives away my age, obviously, a little bit, but and we went after it for the better part of a year. Now, little did I know that was the beginning of what a lot of like VC people call the beginnings of the nuclear winter, when there was effectively no funding for anything. But all that said, like it was a real idea, and it ultimately, someone else did it like probably 10 years later, and it became a massive idea. And it's just take more risks. Like you'll never fall that far, candidly. There's, so if you have that drive and that motivation, you're going to be successful in some avenue. But early on, is really when you have so much opportunity to take even more risk. And I would have taken more risk, in terms of like pursuing, bigger ideas.
Mine would be careful with perspective, which is that like be careful where you get your perspective from. I've been in jobs that were pretty terrible, and thinking, what makes me special compared to this other person, and and I think it's very easy to get pulled into a perspective in life that you kind of feel a little bit trapped within. So surround yourself with people who broaden your perspective, like all the time. Like kind of don't get beaten down by this idea of like, well, this is kind of how it is. This is kind of how it's got to be. Like just remind yourself that it's all kind of made up. Like somebody made it up. Like when I went into Salesforce, it sort of like I felt it was different for me because it felt a little bit like the Matrix, where you can see behind and kind of see that it's all just made up. Like somebody made up the structure. When I started my first company, it was like we started giving people titles, and people were like, well, I want to have this title. I need to be director of this or VP of that. And you're like, sure. I mean, it's all made up. Like you are swimming in this sea of people, and you are trying to coalesce an idea and some humans around this idea to get them to do this work. But it is all just that. It's all a very fluid place. So just like be careful with your perspective, and just think about like you can move anywhere. So just think about it like that. So that would be what I'd say to my earlier self.
Amazing. I want to thank you both for taking the time to share all of your knowledge with us and our community. I want to thank you for taking the time to give us an insight into what it actually takes to be successful and what it looks like to create successful companies. Because I think it is important that people get real answers, not some guru or some guy that made some info product on TikTok and made $1 million. Like that's not scalable and very repeatable, unfortunately. What you all are doing and have done is. So I do want to say really thank you for taking the time to meet with us and talk through and share all of your background and successes.
Yep. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for the time.
Awesome.